nice. How do we start this? You're gonna start like that now. I know you are. You'll be like, you're cut into me saying, how do we start this?
Yeah. So, doing a little review on the new R5 Mark II, which Adrian was able to get his hands on from the front in Sydney. So, renting it for this job, which is always a nice thing to test it out. It's not cheap, the new one. What's the retail?
I think it's like around 6.5. Don't quote me, but it's about that. 6.5 Australian.
Yep.
Yeah, which is obviously like the R5 Mark I's on sale now after that release at a lot of places.
Like 4.5 or something.
Yeah, something along those lines. So it's about a $2,000 difference, I think, for the upgrade now.
Yeah, yeah.
$2,000 for C-Log 2. I reckon it's worth it.
Yep, yep.
Yeah.
So yeah, I thought it'd be good to do a little video, seeing this one's pretty fresh to hit stores. Just as like a similar kind of upfront note on this video, similarly to the Nikon one I did, not going too tech on this in terms of dynamic range testing or anything like that. More so just usability, thoughts on the image that's coming out of it, things like that. So just to be pretty clear up front, you know, if you're here looking for things diving into the weeds on technical aspects of the camera, probably won't find it here because we're lazy. And
it's good.
We've actually been shooting a job with it, so
it's good to put that disclaimer up front.
And realistically, when you pick up a camera, it's not what you're doing. You're not getting out your charts.
That's it. Yeah. We're nerds, but we don't go as deep as someone like Gerard Undone.
Exactly. Yeah. So not going to be a stack of test footage either, because this was actually shooting for one of Adrian's projects. So, you know, always got to be a little bit respectful of the footages for a client. So it's little bits and pieces, but more just chatting through how we found it to use out in the field. So I mean, straight off the bat, what were your kind of initial first impressions?
Pretty amazing. Like, I guess my first impressions were, wow, I can shoot, I guess, a log curve that gives me the dynamic range that I'm used to with something like a C70, pretty close to it, and go handheld. Like the lenses that we brought with us were, I own a 24 to 105 2.8 RF.
Yep.
And a C70, which I brought too. And also rented a 135 1.8 RF, and I could literally go handheld at 135, and the lens stabilization in combination with the IBIS could hold it steady from a distance and get shots that were just almost like they were on a monopod or a tripod or something, and just walk around and go between like photo and video, because that's what this camera is sort of like marketed towards being, right? Like an all-in-one content camera. So I could focus on doing a combination of stills and get nice video in C-Log 2. 8K RAW most of the time as well, which is pretty impressive because we were shooting in challenging lighting conditions inside with a mix of different colours in the lights. So in post, I can just go into post and sort of adjust as I need to if the white balance isn't on point. And just having the ability to crop into certain moments as well, which I found really cool. And then straight to photo mode and snap off like beautiful looking stills, particularly with that lens.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So how did you find it? Like you had a play as well?
Yep. I liked it, and I think it's one of those things of, there's different types of jobs you do. Sometimes it's practical to have a really built out camera with a lot of the kind of tools we lack. Monitors with the kind of tools you're used to for exposure and focus, things like that. V-Lock batteries, because that's what you use and are used to, kind of thing. You know, all that stuff. Outputs to go to wireless feeds and things like that. All that stuff has its place, which something like this probably isn't very good for. But I think what it is good for is being out in the field, in places where you want to minimize gear, but still get good quality results, which is kind of exactly what this is. You know, we're in a remote community in northern Queensland at the moment, and already we were kind of pushing it with the luggage we had. So I think when you're going somewhere and you just want to keep things simple but still have a lot of options, this kind of thing's pretty perfect.
And also having, like, another point I guess I'd make is that talking about like weight restrictions getting out here, because we had to catch like a milk run flight to get out to this part of remote Cape York in Australia. We essentially, I was out here a few weeks ago as part of the same series, and I had a Komodo that I was swinging off my hip with a cine saddle, and I threw my back out a week ago.
Yeah.
So my back was cooked. I'm still having to do like cat-cow stretches in the morning to actually get up and get going. And I thought this is an opportunity to take a really lightweight camera and have someone like Caleb to focus on, capturing beautiful B-roll images on the Komodo, and then I could just run around with something really lightweight. Sort of direct a bit of the video, cover the still angle, and just capture, some B-roll moments too with a really lightweight rig. So
yeah,
it was great for that.
For sure. And again, that comes back to the whole purpose thing, right? Like normally like at the stage we're both at in our careers, we wouldn't do stills and video, but then something like this, just practically sending another person would be a big expense. And as sometimes expanding the crew just isn't a good idea, because the more people, dealing with community and things like that, they are consciously trying to keep the crew size kind of small.
Yeah.
So, for you to be able to switch between video and stills is pretty perfect in this situation.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun too. Like I'd started off as a photographer and then like shooting bodyboarding or surf photography, and I hadn't really owned a stills body since the Z6 Mark 1, and you reviewed the Z6 Mark 3 the other day, so that goes to show the time span it was since I owned my last mirrorless camera.
Yeah,
focusing more on becoming a DP in motion. But I feel like because budgets are also getting a bit tighter in some spaces too, it's nice to be able to like offer that as a DP that is not afraid to pick up a camera and snap off some great moments for the client too. So it was a handy tool for that for sure. But I brought my C70 as well, like I mentioned, and we were comparing the footage too. So like, what were your thoughts on looking at the two different images?
It looked like there was maybe a little bit more range on the C70. But yeah, I don't know, pretty impressed with the R5 footage. A lot of, especially in the 8K RAW, just like rich colors.
Yeah.
A lot of depth and pretty good dynamic range. Like, I've seen cameras with better dynamic range, but I'd say maybe in its class in terms of like a mirrorless.
Yeah.
It seems like maybe the best I've seen.
I think so.
Yeah.
The only thing is, like you mentioned, mirrorless, and it's still, because it's coming from a large megapixel sensor, it's, I feel like the more megapixels, and this is a pretty obvious thing to most DPs, is not necessarily a better thing. So you do get that sort of digital edge to the video footage, where something like a C70 has it over that, because it's coming from a lower megapixel sensor with larger photo sites. So you're getting a nicer video image that isn't overly sharp on that camera. But it also has the ability to crop in from 8K if you need to do that and reframe things. So, and a lot of clients that we work with, some will note it. Like, if I was shooting a bigger job, like a TVC or a series or something like that, definitely wouldn't lean towards using a mirrorless camera because of that. And also obviously workability around the form factor. But for something that's like a content job, then this fits quite nicely into like a Canon lineup, which then you could also match with the Reds. Which is kind of what we use, those two systems predominantly. Yeah,
for sure. And with the upcoming C400, it's going to be a really good camera to complement that.
For sure, yeah. And it'd be really interesting to see the image out of the C400. Like, we've seen test footage, but I was almost going to buy the R5 before this job, and I thought, what, I'll rent it and test it first, and I'll probably put the money into the C400 when it comes out later this month. So yeah, really looking forward to having that and the C70, and then I'd say the R5 as well at some point later this year.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And a thought I had kind of on like the journey you're talking about, how, I think we both, a period, what seems like forever ago, used to use SLRs a little bit in workflows, and then I feel like went away from using them because there was something about them that weren't quite happy with compared to other cameras. Like, whether it be in the Sony era, jump into like the FS7, or going away from Canons after that whole 5D, 7D era, things like that, to step up image quality. I think it's cool that things have gone full circle and that now I've seen really good results out of this that I'd put potentially on par with some of the more expensive like cinema
For sure.
film focus cameras that we use, like the Komodos and stuff like that.
Yeah, and I think like the image would, like it kind of has a similar look to say an FX6, I'd say. Obviously with a bigger sensor and more megapixels, it's sharper than the FX6, and it does have a little bit more of a digital look to it, but it still kind of leans more towards that, I guess, if you're sort of comparing a video purpose body. Better colours though than the Sony system, I think, at this stage. Like Canon still stands out.
Yeah.
And more dynamic range, which is cool apparently on paper. So but yeah, overall pretty impressed with it. Any other thoughts that you had when you were looking at the footage? Like, could you see anything there that stood out to you?
Not really. Like, I think, what you were talking about with the whole like downsampled thing, I guess like my thoughts on that would be just depends on the purpose. Like, I think some of our clients would probably really like that look because it does look quite sharp and detailed. And so maybe it's just the purpose thing where it's like, if it's a bit more, if it is the type of project where they want things to be super clean and super sharp, it'll be pretty good.
Yeah.
And if it's not that type of project, maybe it's just using vintage glass or something like that to take that edge off it.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, straight out off the bat, I guess, when we were flying over here from Sydney on our flight across from Cairns, we just whipped it out and had a play with it in the plane, and we had a 35mm 1.8 in there, which is the cheaper of the 35 lenses now that Canon have released for RF, and that was an incredible little like run and gun, almost pocket solution to capturing like moments where you're traveling. I could see that being used a lot in documentary where you can't get like a bigger camera out of your backpack that might be in the overhead luggage or in check-in. Sure. So and straight away we looked at that, and even like through the viewfinder and on the back of the camera, it looked beautiful. And then we brought it into Resolve and we're like, wow, look at this dynamic range, and the colours are all there, and we kind of thought that it looked like a crispier C70, but upon further review and in more sort of varied situations, C70 has that more of a organic look to it, probably because of the DGO sensor. So it'd be interesting to see what the C400 brings to the table.
Yeah, for sure. And I think just on that note of benefits of this style body, as you would have noticed, sometimes like ripping out your big camera, Komodo's fully rigged up or whatever it may be, I think it's brings out a different response in people who aren't used to being on camera. Big cameras can be a bit more daunting in a lot of scenarios.
For sure.
So it's good for things like that, where more sensitive situations with human stories and things like that, it might help make people a bit more comfortable, which is cool with having an option like this.
It was actually crazy what we could get, because we used that little 35mm lens as well, which is tiny, and it looks like a little amateur setup that you're running with handheld, and you can walk around and get like 8K footage in RAW handheld with that tiny setup and still get some really, really cool moments and be so discreet about it. I think that's a bit of a game changer, and it was really nice to actually use a viewfinder that looked like it was almost like in real time too.
Yeah, for sure.
Should we talk about the difference in the flavours of the 8K as well?
Yeah. So what do you think?
So I noticed there's the full sensor readout 8K. That's the one with the highest data rate. And I kind of started using that straight off the bat, just because I was curious to see what the image was like. And it was really detailed, rich with colour. And then we tried the other option, which was still raw, but they used some sort of like pixel binning or line skipping technique
Yep, yep.
to give you a 4K readout of the full sensor in raw. So, yeah, still detailed images, but you do lose some of that richness in the two different flavors
Yep.
of codec.
Yeah.
But handy as well, like we were saying, mixed lighting environment, you could shoot in a raw flavor
Yep.
and be able to like change the white balance in post, no problems.
Yeah,
Which was
yeah.
and have a much smaller file size too, so that was really, really handy.
For sure.
Shot a little bit of slow motion stuff too, 100
Yep.
frames, because as a surf cinematographer, I'm curious to see how this solution will work in the water.
In housing, for sure.
Yeah. I currently have like a housing for my C70, so considering getting the R5, having IBIS on the sensor, to be able to flick it over to stills and have a play with still photography in the water again would be fun.
Yep.
Yeah, the images look really nice, really detailed. I'd say sharper than the 4K image in 100 frames out of the C70.
Yeah.
Still yet to compare the two with slow motion in exactly the same lighting environment, but definitely a tempting choice for the water as well,
Yep.
pending the overheating issue. So I guess
Yeah,
we'll see
yeah.
what happens with that.
For sure.
Yeah.
And on that note, this interview now is being recorded in one of the 4K settings, long GOP. So thought that was good to test, because generally in workflows I use and a lot of other people use, I'll generally use a more space efficient setting for interviews. You know, say for example, you might run something like this for your long take interviews and then shoot your B-roll in 8K 50. That would be kind of a common shooting scenario. And, you know, like what you were saying then, get those. I think you do get that richer color depth in 8K. I'd noticed that.
Yeah.
But they were all pretty good.
Yeah, for sure. And it obviously does a bit of noise reduction in camera when you are using those other codecs.
Yep.
So that's handy if you just want a faster turnaround and save data space. So
Yep.
yeah, all in all, pretty good camera. If you've got the coin, get it, I'd say, if you're in the Canon ecosystem.
Yeah, so I guess who it's for, from a filmmaking perspective, people who want a solid portable option, a solid travel option, something for certain scenarios where having a big camera isn't suitable, but you still want files that could end up really high quality, whether that be for content or, you know, if this stuff was going to a colorist, I'm sure the colorist would be pretty happy with these.
For sure.
8K raw
Oh
files.
man, you'd be able to work with it for sure. Yeah, and it would be interesting to test it with like a nice set of vintage glass.
Yep.
Like I was thinking about it last night. I've been invited to come back up to this community in a few weeks, and I'm going to keep my kit really lightweight. So I'll bring my 24-105 all-in-one lens solution,
Yep.
and probably just the R5 Mark II body.
Yep.
I also might bring a little vintage glass with me, like maybe a Leica 50mm or something like that.
Yep.
And yeah, small ND to go in it, and it'd be really nice to see what you can get if you just do soften that, take the digital edge off it a little bit, and still use that full sensor and C-Log too.
Yeah, for sure. And like personally, I know recently a short doc that I've got coming out, I shot a bulk of it on the A7S III just because we were doing overnight hikes. And I definitely see down the pipeline me shooting projects on cameras like this, where I just need to be super nimble, can't carry a lot of gear.
Yeah.
You know, for example, carry this and some wireless pros, and you're going to be able to get pieces to cameras, interviews, nice B-roll. Do quite a lot with this.
For sure.
I'm excited about that, just from the, I guess, creativity potential of being able to do something with a setup that I can practically carry everything I need.
Totally.
So that scenario, it was just, I had one vintage lens that I really liked. I'd use a hard stop ND, which was good for bright environments, and then I could take that off for dimmer light scenes. And yeah, I was pretty happy with the look of it.
Yeah.
Like a nice vintage lens on a full frame camera can get you some pretty nice looks.
Yeah.
So yeah, same with something like this. This would be
even better.
better.
Yeah.
I'd assume, because I'm only getting 4K
Yeah.
XAVC
Yeah.
I.
Yeah.
on that A7S III. So this would have a lot more depth and probably be a better quality end result.
Yeah, yeah.
So yeah, excited for tools like this, for
sure.
scenarios like that.
For sure. Yeah, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I guess you've got to be open, especially in this, like, hate to use a cheesy line, but like in this fast moving world and environment, you've got to be open to like adapting with the technology and the tools and offer.
Yeah.
And if it means having a smaller camera system to sort of tick certain boxes, then don't be afraid to sort of feel like you're taking a step backwards, but you're not really.
Yeah.
You know?
Pick the best tool for the job.
Exactly.
And this is
Yeah.
just an example of
Yeah.
better tools
For
starting
sure.
to come out. For me, just to wrap things up a bit, in thinking about how this compares to competition, I think I'd say compared to Nikon and Sony's offerings, downfalls of this would probably be a bit less battery life and more prone to overheating. Positives would be, I would say, a better image.
100%. Yeah.
Yeah,
What do you reckon? Wrap it up?
so that'll do.
Fist bump?
That's enough of us.
That's enough of us. All right.
Sweet.
Cool.